Zapier and the data that they bring, because that's really the ingredients which you can later use. Then we're going to live connect a new instance of Flex to Zapier and see how we can test it. And then I've decided to do the SMS integration to Twilio. So this is also available as a video already on our Zap cookbook. But it's such an interesting integration, which really pulls together many of the components that I decided that that's a great Zap to build, to watch being built, and because it uncovers a lot of the different things you can do, and hopefully also raises some questions. And then if everything goes according to schedule, we'll have some time for Q&A. Now, if you look on the right side of your screen, at least I hope that your screen resembles my screen somewhat, there's a Q&A section as well next to chat, which you can use for questions. Now, some guidelines for that. So use the Q&A for asking questions, more broader questions. So of course, if you have a question halfway through my story, for example, hey, I missed step 1, could you go back? Put them in the chat. But if you have a more broader question about Zapier, like, hey, could I do this? Or could you maybe show how to build X, Y, and Z? I mean, I can't make any promises. I might not have the proper account, etc. Put them in the Q&A. It has a voting function, so we can see a little bit. We can see quite easily which are the most popular ones and which one we should address that would make most people happy. Another guideline: there are no dumb questions. So this is rather complex for some of you, as it was for me when I started first with Zapier. So don't feel like you can ask the question. Of course, I can promise that we can answer them all. If we can't, then we'll try to get back to you afterwards. When you do ask a question in the Q&A, try to make it comprehensive, also that it's maybe interesting for others, and give all the necessary context that we need. So think of it more as a sort of like an email that you would send to our support rather than a chat. And especially if you type it as a chat, it can be quite challenging to understand the full question you're trying to ask. And of course, we try to get to most of the questions in the Q&A part in the end. Now, we can start with the first part. So let me, by the way, move my screen quickly back to the chat in case I'm missing something. So what is Zapier? Now, we're going to do a slight bit of internet history. I mean, like really tiny bits, to be honest. And that will help make you understand what is Zapier, what does it do, and why is it so powerful. So in the olden days, web apps were more like isolated. They weren't necessarily connected. And if you want to move data from one app to the other, usually what you have to do, and for many apps you still do. I mean, this is not like, it's not like this is no longer happening, actually. Like probably many of you, if you work in an office or in any kind of administrative job or computer-based job, you'll be still doing some of these things. Where if you want to move data from one app to the other, let's say from your Excel sheet to the accounting or the other way around, you need to export it, usually as CSV, and then import it into another web app in order to move the data between. Now, that is really like the old-fashioned way. Now, in the last, let's say, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, don't pin me on this, this thing called API started to appear. I believe that it's application programmable interface. I should have actually checked this, but I think that is the abbreviation. And what that actually allows is for other apps to basically talk to each other. So many web apps now have their own API layer around, which is sort of like a door, which you can get in with a certain code and you get some information out, or you can also send some information there if you have the proper authentication. And so that's really great. But for those APIs to still talk together, that still needs some code. It's not the most advanced code, but still for the average person, that's still an incomprehensible amount of code. And of course, at Sharetribe, we are really trying to lower the threshold for anybody to build a marketplace. And so this is part of that. And so that's why the Zapier integration is so great, because the Zapier integration, basically Zapier takes the place of that in-between part that now needs code. And basically what Zapier has done is that they have just built, they have just integrated with every, I'm not going to say every web app imaginable, but They claim 3,000. I didn't do a manual recount of that, but that sounds really reliable. Of the most popular web apps, or any apps that have a API, and they have arranged the integration. And on top of that, they have then sort of pasted a visual interface with which people with a little bit of web savviness but no coding tech can have these APIs talk to each other and can have data sent from one app to the other. What is important to remember, though, is that for Zapier, everything revolves around Zaps. Zaps are these workflows that you can build in Zapier, and a Zap consists of at least one trigger and one event. One trigger event and one action. So it's a really if this, then do that kind of logic. And so a Zap is always kicked off by a trigger. So an event in web app A kicks off the sending of some data related to that event. And then with that information, you can do, or with that data, you can then put next actions into place. And you can have a whole string of actions, like not until infinity, but a pretty complex Zap, as you will see later. I'm just making an extra note of that this is unfortunately not a way to query the API without coding. So something really needs to happen for the Zap to take action, an event in this case. Now in Flex, we have added the following events. So there's 3 event categories: listing event, user events, and transaction events. And then each one has 3 different, I believe the word is event types. We can check it back in a couple of minutes once we hop into the Zapier API. So listing created, listing updated, listing deleted, user created, user updated, user deleted, transaction initiated, transaction transitions, and transaction updated. Now, there's a lot of information. I'll do a quick switch to another tab that I have here, because you can find all this information back in the Flex docs, where if you go to, so it's sharetribe.com/docs, actually. Let's start from there. And then here on the left, you can click on Cookbook. Like, the rest of the information is pretty technical, but this is information for that most people should be able to follow. So you go to Cookbook, events, and then under events, there's an article, set up and use Zapier, which is which is kind of like the brief version of what we're going to do in this webinar. And so you can find back here the things that I'm just telling you now. So what type of events there are, what do they do, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll now continue with the presentation, but in case you feel like overwhelmed, here is where you can find it back. So these are the ones, these are the things that are being sent. So these are the events that can trigger off a Zap. But you can also add actions to Flex in the Zap. And actions are things kind of like input. So if something happens, then do this in Flex. And in our case, that is search actions, 3 different types: show user based on the user ID, show listing, and show transaction. And so these will all make a lot more sense once we start building one. But based on a user ID, so it could be, for example, that you are able to extract the user ID from another app. Let's say, I can come up with a good example. But you can see what we'll build later is that based, for example, on an event in Flex saying this transaction is initiated, based on the transaction ID, then you can then have Flex show the transaction based on the transaction ID that you got from the event. Now, I'll stop rambling now. This will become a lot more clear once we start building. So actually, let's start building. So if you want to follow along, I don't necessarily design this webinar with this in place, but maybe in the replay, you can follow along with this video. You need the following things. So first of all, you need a Zapier account. I'm going to assume that everybody is able to get a Zapier account. It is really quite simple. You just need to sign up with any of the different sign-up methods that you want, and then you create an account, and then you get to something like this, which is your Zap dashboard. Obviously, if you've never used Zapier before, it will be quite empty. You won't have these folders, etc. But it will roughly look like this. We're going to need Flex Console. We're going to need the demo marketplace. We're not going to need the the Zapier cookbook, but why not keep it open? And we can get rid of this presentation for now. And actually, also, let's get rid of this. So first of all, let's connect this Flex console to Zapier. So in Zapier, click on My Apps. Then you can click on Add Connection. You search for the app. So in this case, Sharetribe Flex. And then Zapier will prompt you for a client ID and a client secret. Now you can generate this client ID and client secret in Flex Console. And actually there is pretty good instructions here in the window even. So you can go to, let me just keep the chat open. So you can click here and it will actually bring you to the right window. Sorry, the window opened in my other screen, but and then here in the window, as you can see, I have several test client IDs and client secrets already ready, but we're going to make a new one for this purpose. So add new application name. You can honestly just fill in whatever here, but let's say Zapier webinar June 15. And then this is the important thing. You need to generate one for the integration API because the marketplace API doesn't work with Zapier yet. So add application. Now it generates for you a client ID and a client secret, which are the things that were being asked, if you recall, in this screen here. So let's first copy in the client ID. We copy this into this screen here. And then we copy in here the client secret as well. Now, this is truly a secret. You should never share this with anybody. You should, as it say here, also somewhere safe before you close this. And as soon as we close this, this will disappear. So please copy and save it somewhere safe, because as soon as we close this, you won't be able to ever get it back again. In case you lose it and you need it, or you need to set up, for example, let's say you lose it and something goes wrong with your Zapier, you just remove the old one and generate a new one. So yes, continue. All right, now I've been authenticated. Oh, well, here we go with a slight demo effect. That is not supposed to happen. Just give me a second. Okay, let's try it again. I happen to have already some existing combinations here, but or existing connections here. Let's try again. I might have started an old, actually, because I'm logged in under the Zapier or the Sharetribe company account, that it might have an older version than we have made publicly available. Apologies about that confusion. I'll try again. Let me know if this was confusing in the chat. I think I've just chose the wrong version. That should not be an option for you because you don't have access to that, because that's part of our company account. So let's start again. Add connection. So well, now you can see that I'm going to have some trouble because or maybe I still have the client secret under my paste button. Okay, I do. So client secrets. Let's find back the. So this was the one. Remember, I called it Zapier webinar June 15. So the client ID is a public thing. So that's not so secret. And I just still happen to have the client secret under my paste button. So I'm just going to try to authenticate it again with this one. And hopefully we'll get some better news this time. Okay, new connection added. Here we go. Demo number 3, added 8 seconds ago. Let's just rename it because otherwise we can't find it later on. So let's call this Zapier webinar June 15 as well. So then we are all clear on this. Now, so now we have connected. Are there any, actually, let's take a quick pause. Any questions so far about this? I see nothing in the Q&A, nothing in the chat. I'm going to take one zip and give you a chance to type a question if you have lost me so far, but otherwise we'll continue with actually testing this app. All right, looking good, looking sharp. So we had a connection. Now, how do we know that it works? We're going to build. Thanks, Wes. Thanks, that's for the confirmation. I appreciate that. Let's make a Zap. So we're going to make a Zap with the Sharetribe Flex connection we just made. Beta, yeah, that's the one we want. And now here, dropping back to what we discussed. So here now it shows the different type of event. So first you need to choose the event category when you build this app. So let's just make one. Actually, let's do listing events because this is we're gonna now create a small problem for ourselves. But you'll see this later. So let's choose listing events, choose account, Zapier webinar, June 15, that's the one we just connected, and then continue. And so the event type that we want is say listing created. Now we're going to run this. And in my case, in the case of the demo, this should not gather any data because on my demo side, actually no listing has been created recently. All right, or maybe it has been. I forgot about this. So because every time you set up an action or a step in Zapier, Zapier asks you to check it because this is a long chain of events. So Zapier wants to be fully clear that each of these different links in the chain actually works. So you're going to be asked to test each of these actions. And now we're going to be able to test. We've been asked to test the trigger. And so it has actually found the listing event. Namely, a new listing was added on. Here you can see. So here you can see the data that gets sent with this event trigger. Okay, the event type listing created. That's not too interesting, but the created at date. So this was the date that is created. And now comes the more interesting stuff. Listing ID. So this will unlock our information about the listing. Listing title, description, etc., etc. So we can confirm now that this works. We have a connection and it's pulling in data. It has queried our Flex connection for us and has found that recently a listing has been added. Let's see, it also found another one. Quite surprising, actually. I did not recall that this has been, that I added one, but apparently I have. So this listing B was another social media sauna and listing event A was a social media sauna. Okay, not the most creative names there, but it has found 2 events. So we can say with certainty that it's able to listen for events and it's able to send the relevant data to Zapier. Now, that's what we wanted to do in this step. So we've tested it, we've connected it and tested it. Now let's build the text integration and see if we are able to do that. So the text message integration I want to build is quite a handy one. Namely that if you have a provider on your marketplace, we want to send to the provider a text message to the phone number which they have registered, containing information about the booking that was made, the date of the booking, for example, which listing and not then send this listing ID, but actually send the title. And then maybe also the amount of money that was paid. You know, if you're a provider on your marketplace, that's kind of a nice message to get. You're sitting somewhere on the beach, it's summer here, and you're sipping a nice cold drink, and you get a text message that, hey, you just got a booking. I think that's a really great experience for a marketplace provider. So that's what we want to build, and that is all now possible with Zapier. So for that case, actually, let's name this app for a second. So send text message to provider. So that's the name of the app in this case. And that means that we want to actually change the trigger event that kicks it off, because we're not interested in a listing event, but actually we're interested in a transaction event. More precisely, we are interested in the sub event transaction initiated, because that's the first step in the booking flow. Now, I have to make a note here that what counts as transaction initiated, and especially what counts as transaction transitioned, can depend on how you have built your Flex marketplace. Like, one of the great powers of Flex is that you can build a completely custom booking flow. And so these different transaction stages can be highly customized for your needs. So I'm now basing this on what comes with the demo, but it might be slightly different for your marketplace. That doesn't mean that the Zap doesn't work, but it might just pull different information, or it might get triggered at different points. But you'll notice that once you start running test Zaps. And it's so case specific based on how you've built the booking flow that it's difficult to capture all of that in a webinar like this. But transaction initiated is what we want to do. So continue now. I did make sure that there is a test trigger available for this. So let's actually introduce the players in this little act that we're going to perform. So if you look at the Flex console that I have for the demo marketplace, for which we're making these Zaps, we can see here, and hopefully you're all familiar with this as existing Flex users. You can see here that my demo marketplace has a bunch of users, the demo users, and then some users that I made for testing purposes and other purposes. This webinar, for example, being one of them. And there's two players here. So first of all, the player with which I am logged in, ZN is Zapier test number 10. Is the name of the user. So that's this fella. And then the other player in this act is SuredZ. So I'm not the most creative with names, as you can see, because SuredZ will perform the role of the provider, because SuredZ has a listing. Sjoerd Zap persona that will be booked. And mostly we're interested because SuredZ has a phone number in his profile, which we're going to use to send the text message to. So the action that we're going to perform is that ZN here is going to book SuredZ sauna, and then SuredZ is going to get a text message on this phone here. So that's what's going to happen. So SuredZ, I just already, prior to this webinar, I made this booking. So, well, we can actually see if we can just, so like we have some time. I can. No, I'm not gonna now do it. But I've made a booking, believe me, with this user, and we can see that once we run the testing flow. So we want to start with we want to start the Zap with transaction initiated. Now we just set that up. So let's test this trigger. And indeed, we can see that earlier today here, and at least in Helsinki time, apparently, on the June 15th, a booking was made. Does it say anything else? Well, we can see that a booking was made. And this transaction initiated gives us a bunch of really interesting information, which we can then use to fill the text message with with content that we just described. So booking date, name of the listing, etc. So first of all, here's the transaction ID. So that's one that's going to be interesting for later. But here also we have the provider ID the customer ID, the listing ID, and the booking ID. And we can use this information to populate the next action. So this is the trigger. And then the end action that we want to do is create send a text message with Twilio. Now, so this is a text message web app. You can sign up twilio.com. I'm not going to spend the time making that, but it's also pretty straightforward. You get some test credit, and it will populate your account with some credit, and then you can connect it to Zapier, quite similar to how Flex is connected. And then you can use it to send text messages. And then if you want to actually use this for your production marketplace, you probably need to upgrade your account, etc., etc. But you'll see that once you try this out. So this is the trigger, and this is the end event that we want. So we want to send an SMS from this Twilio account. So I have only one Twilio account. From number, well, we can only choose one number because Twilio obviously doesn't, thank God, doesn't allow you to use fake numbers. So this will be the number that you choose for your marketplace service phone number in Twilio. But we need some information to make this happen. So a to number is what we need. Now, this is the data that our Zap has generated so far. It is a lot, but unfortunately, it does not contain a phone number. And it's specifically, especially not the phone number of the provider, because the only thing we know of the provider at this point is the provider ID. So that means that between this step and this step, we need to build some steps in between. And this is where the Flex actions come in. So we want to now put the action show user, because we want more information about the user. We have a user ID, that is the transaction provider ID. So we're going to ask Flex, show us the user of this account using the user ID from the first action. So Zapier really nicely organized this. So this number means the step in the Zap. So this is all the information you get from one. And you'll see now that we're going to add a 2, that later in Twilio, there will be a list here which starts with 2 period and then some information. So we don't want the customer ID because that is the person who paid, but we want the provider ID. So this is the input, and we're going to say, show us the user with this provider ID. In this case, we probably don't need any of this information. So you can have, you can query additional related information about this user, but in this case, we're not going to use it. But you could, for example, let's say if you want to send an email, here as a notification, you might want to include the profile image of the provider for just to make a nice looking email. And there is, well, I'm not sure what you could do with Stripe account, but there is probably a use for it at some point. So let's run this and see if it provides us with a provider phone number. It says now optional fields without value. We haven't used all of this relationship, but it's not important for us for now. So let's do a test and review. And indeed, like we just got a user back. So this is the ID, and now we know that this is the email address, but we know that this is Stuart C, who likes turtles. And the most important part, Stuart C's phone number, which is this thing that we see. So basically, we just queried Flex for all of this data based on the ID that we got in step 1. And so now we have a phone number. So that's great, because now we can populate the third step, Twilio, with a required to number, which is step 2. Bum, 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 bum. User profile protected data phone number. There we go. That's great. Now we want to send a message like, hi, hi, for example, first name. Why not? It's nice to get a message with your name. Hi, first name. You just got a booking from, and for this case, we should ask maybe put in another step, because we don't know at this point the name of the booker. So let's do another show user step here. Where we ask Flex, please also show us the user who booked this, so the customer ID. Same thing, different information. So you just got a booking from first name Zapier test. So now we go back to Twilio and we continue editing the content here. So you just got a booking from third step. Okay. How are we on time? Okay, we still have some time. I can try to add also the booking dates as this step. In the meantime, I'm just gonna call again for if there's any questions or all clear. Please feel free to ask questions. Again, no dumb questions. I try to keep it at a good speed, not too fast, not too slow. But let me know if it's all clear again. There's actually, I think there's a small delay here, so this pause might seem longer than you think is necessary, but all right. Wes is all good. If you are not good, this is your chance to speak up, but I'm going to keep an eye on this, but continue in the meantime. So, which is great. So we now have a trigger and 2 actions, and with that, we have a final action where we use the information, the data that we gathered from these 2 prior actions, which is, I mean, to be honest, like when I first started working with Zapier. Okay, can you show the phone number part again real quick? Sure. So let's just open up that step. So it's the action show user. We're querying for transaction provider ID. And that's only because of how you set up your Flex Marketplace, but in the demo settings that come with this demo file, with the Marketplace demo, in the user fields, there is an opportunity to fill in the phone number. But here you can add, if you are a developer, you can add it, or you can have your developer add any kind of data here, street address, favorite color, anything. And you can query that information then if that's available. So if you started your own instance of Flex, or you changed a couple of things, it might be that you didn't ask users for a phone number. But so basically what we did here with the phone number, we just asked, hey, show me all of the information that you have in Flex about the user with this ID, and that happened to contain the phone number in this case. And so Zapier is able to load all the information of the previous steps into the last step. And then in the, in the to number field, we just say, okay, insert the data here from step 2, because we know you can actually even rename these steps. So actually, maybe we should do that for clarity. So let me just do that so that this is more clear. So we can call this step show provider information, or maybe even like pull up provider information. And then we call this step, rename step, pull up customer information. So then it's maybe more clear on the end side where this information comes from. So the to number, so to who this number is being sent, which is supposed to be the provider, we get that from the step provider information, and that happens to have the protected data phone number. But as said, all this metadata, like protected data, is customizable. So you can set up your marketplace to ask a whole range of questions on this. In this case, it's just phone number. No, I added it twice. It's not super handy, but I hope that made that clear. Otherwise, reach out in the end and we can, well, like I said, also on the, actually, there is a more detailed video on the cookbook where I'm building this. And also there is a Zap template available for this one. So you can check that out at your own pace. All right, cool. We have 22 minutes. I'll just add one more. We're going to pull up some booking information. So we'll just add the booking dates, and we'll leave the money, etc., for what it is right now, unless we hit that part of the Q&A, and then we can still open up this Zap and continue editing. But I'm going to try to finish this up in the next 5 minutes, and then open the floor for Q&A. So we've had pulled up information from 2 users. Now let's use another action, namely about the listing, because let's say your provider has, some marketplace provider can have, I don't know, let's say you're selling used goods, used clothes, for example. It would be still nice to get a text message, but if you happen to have listed there like 40 different, I don't know, sneakers, it's kind of nice to get a little bit more specific information about which one has been sold. So again, we look for Sharetribe Flex, and we want to ask them to show the listing. Now we have the listing ID because that got fed to us in the transaction ID. So the input here comes from step 1 still, transaction listing ID. And we're basically now going to ask Flex to send us all the information you have around these listing ID. Now there's, again, here different relationships. So you could query the images, for example, which might be interesting for other actions. Let's say you build this app about, hey, new listing got added, and you want to send an email. Well, okay, let's say the following. So let's stick with the sneaker example. So you have a marketplace for used sneakers, and that's one of your customers is really interested in this category of sneakers. Then you could, in theory, build a Zap so that sends an email once a new set of sneakers get listed to this particular category, and you could send them an email and then include the images. So this is where this relationship part is interesting. So to pull that kind of stuff up. But for us now, again, this is not so interesting because we're just going to be interested in the name for now. So we continue this. We're going to run a test. Yes, optional field, but like I said, we're not using this right now. And then here we have the title of the listing, which we can then use in the text message. So let's rename this to pull up info on the listing, or actually maybe just give us the listing name. That is very clear what information it is. And we go back to the end step and we say, you just get a booking from this person for your listing. And then we go here and ask to insert the data, a listing name. Here, listing title. Sorry, I was looking for the wrong word. For your listing, etc., etc., etc. Now, you can put a lot more info in this text message, as you can imagine. For example, the booking dates, if this is a rental thing. Well, in this case, it is. You can put the amount of money, the amount of commission that they receive, the amount of money that they receive. You can even pull up the messages. So, actually, no, I'm not gonna expand it anymore. But you could ask Zapier to show the booking, and then part of the booking, part of the transaction, is the messages that get sent as part of the transaction. So, for example, if you make a booking, you can send a message like, hey, looking forward to using your sauna, for example. And you could pull up that information as well. Now, in a text message, that doesn't make that much sense, but you can imagine that you can send an email with that message so that the users don't actually need to log into your marketplace to receive this message. And then they can continue the conversation over email if that's what you would like for your marketplace. Now, continue. Let's run a quick test, and then let's open the floor for a Q&A. That gives us another 15 minutes roughly. Unfortunately, I was not able to get the screen, my phone running on the screen with the software that we're using. But I'm gonna turn on my sound, and you just need to believe me that this text message got in, and I can show it for the to the camera. In the meantime, while we wait for the text message, because this is not an immediate text message, because we're having a trial account with Twilio, so it's not giving us priority treatment. But let's send a test and review. And so we should get this, hi Sjoerd, you just got a booking. Oh, wow, it is actually surprisingly fast. So unfortunately, you didn't hear the sound because I was so smart to turn off the sound, because I did not want to have this webinar interrupted. But I don't know if this is readable, but you can see here that we now, no, this is not readable. Apologies, like I was hoping to mirror my screen to the, no, this doesn't make any impression, does it? You just have to believe me that I just got a message from my Twilio account that says, hi Sjoerd, you just got a booking from Zapier test for your listing. Sjoerd Zapier Sauna. Well, that ends the showy part of the webinar. Open the room for a Q&A. And let's see how far we get. If we have some time, I can also show another integration, or I can expand on this one. But let's give a little bit of time for the Q&A to populate. Can you add URLs to the... That's a good question. So Wes asks, can you add URLs to the Twilio text, like a link to the customer profile? The thing is, yeah, you can possibly. Let me think about this for one moment. Because the problem is, or not a problem, potentially a problem is that because the console like Flex and where you host it, where you host your template, they're independent. It's the whole idea, of course, of headless. So you probably need to populate. Actually, I'm going to show this. You probably need to populate. Let's see. I'm just going to dive into this Twilio and see how far we get. So, because what information do we get about the customer? So, we get about their provider ID. Not that much, actually. I could imagine that maybe the user ID is part of a URL. Let's just check this out. Actually, this is a really good question. So profile settings. So view your profile. Yeah. So actually, yes, you can. So this is how the profile looks of the person who booked this, right? So this is the profile of Zapier test number 10, and so this is the customer who booked. Yeah, correct. So this is the customer who booked, and this is how the profile looks. So this is the URL of the profile, and you can see here, this is the last part of the URL. I hope that it's visible on your screen. Let me see if I can make that somehow bigger. I'm afraid not. No, I cannot. But there is a, let me see if it's not, like, tell me in the chat if it's not visible. But there's a string here in the end, and that corresponds to the listing, that corresponds to the customer ID that we get here, right? You can see here it ends in, or it starts with 60B6317, and indeed 60B6317. Now, the part that all right, cool. I just checked the chat for a second. So the part that Flex doesn't know is, what did you call your domain name, and what is the URL structure of your domain name? You could, for example, call it, wesismarketplace.com/listings, and then this part. Like that very much depends on how you set it up. But once you know that, you could put something like see the user at http sorry, www.wesismarketplace.com/listings/ and then put the user ID there. Actually, is this the right one? No, this is the wrong one. Customer ID. Then put the customer ID there, which together, like Twilio will parse it together into a URL, and then it will actually end up here. Is that clear? It's not the most. It seems a simple question, but it's rather technical because so much depends on how is the URL structure of your marketplace. But so yes, it is possible, but you need to know the part that comes in your URL, in your marketplace of your URL, the part that comes before your user ID in the listing. Yeah, I guess so. The problem is, you know what? We can test it with we just add another step, and then we just send an email to ourselves, and then we see, does it work? Unfortunately, like I could test it, but since the screen thing doesn't work, you won't really see a convincing test. But we can do a quick email to myself, which I can then show on the screen. Just give me a moment. So let's just add another step. Why not? Or let's just put a step in between where we say send email, Gmail, choose send email, choose account. Well, let's just use services at Sharetribe for now. Well, these should all actually end up on my. Oh, this is actually we're making a small mini zap, which will also show you useful stuff. So because I have this all go to my Sharetribe account, so we can use the email, which happens to be an email that ends up in an email address that I own. And then the question was, so from, I'm just going to use the standard thing here. That's not too interesting. From name Zapier test for now. And then in the body, oh, sorry. Yeah, Zapier test, and let's go all the. I'm just now filling this with some filler stuff because the part that we want to show is that URL population, right? Based on that earlier question. So we can say, hi, a booking has been made by this person, and see his profile. I guess we can even, well, you know what, let's keep it simple first and then do the other thing. So see his profile at, now this is the URL of my marketplace. So I'm going to copy this part, which is like the demo name.soundontimedemo sharetribe.com/u, and then this. And then we say, add to that the user ID, and then that should populate a URL. All right. Let's see, Isaac, if this works. It would be somewhat embarrassing if it doesn't, but best sure. But then, you know, this isn't that. It's not the first one, or this is the first one. All right. Continue. Let's send a test email. All right. Now, let me just open my email for a moment. So that no private the stuff is shown there. Yeah, so here now I received an email. This can be made a little bit bigger. So you can see here, sent from, well, we just filled this in, but sent to this user. Hi, booking has been made by Zapier Test, and see his profile at this. And so now it has populated a clickable URL, which hopefully, yeah, there we go. Oh, actually, well, I just now realized I took the provider ID, but I guess that you understand the logic behind this. And we could probably even make it nicer now if there's no further questions, we can clean this up a little bit, because I'm guessing the Gmail. Is there another question? Yeah. Oh no, there's answered being question. So I guess we can actually put some HTML in the email. So we could also do, rather than saying here is his profile, we can say probably something like, here we can say HTML. So we can say, hi, booking has been made. See his profile. Or well, you can say, see his profile. So, okay, now you're going to all witness my rusty HTML, but see his profile. Aref is this. So this is HTML. I'm not gonna explain exactly how this works, but just when we make a clickable link, those who do understand this will be very impressed, hopefully. Oh no, I did not. Excuse me, no, I did not at the right place. So href is see his profile. His profile. I'm very self-conscious about the level of my coding skills, but there we go. Let's run another test message. Are you able to design those? Well, as you just saw, Isaac, it allows for HTML. So, I mean, probably sending it with Gmail is probably not the right one. There is also, there's integration with loads of other email services. So you can connect a MailChimp, for example, where you can draft a campaign or you can draft messages. And there is, I think they have integrations with SendGrid, Mandrill, loads of other email things, and I'm pretty sure you can design emails within those services, but I can't speak to that with certainty. Now let's see if we actually see if I'm actually gonna remove, because there might be some embarrassing emails in there. So yeah, okay, cool, yeah, all right. Happy to share this again. So well, not the nicest, but as you can see, we have now generated this as a hyperlink. And that also works. So again, so that works. You just need to know what is the preceding part of the URL. Any other question? Great question. This is great. I think this really shows the what's the word? Versatility, I hope, of Zapier, and that a lot of hacking can be done in the margin for that. Any other questions? Okay, yeah. Gang, I just added to my answer. Yeah, that's exactly, that's what I was trying to say. Well, if there's no other questions, then I want to really heartily thank you for your time and great participation. This is this is the first one, so this is really exciting. I hope you got your questions answered. If you have any further questions, reach out to us through support@sharetribe.com. And for more information about Zapier, I suggest to start with the setup and use Zapier, which, like I said before, was a recap of the basically everything I just said, and it's a great sort of reference. Couple of videos, and also some Zap templates. And actually, just hold on a second. Something important that I forgot to say before you leave. So This Zap templates is a really interesting thing. I discovered this feature only quite late, but this is a way, so I've only made 3 so far, but this allows us to create template zaps. So I can build everything I just did. And actually for the Twilio one, I have one ready. So you can click here. And that generates a template where the only thing, I mean, it's still a lot of work, but the only thing you need to do is connect your accounts, and then the template will already have all the steps into place. So I'm gonna do my best to expand with this, expand this list and do another couple of interesting ones here. I can't promise anything on the deadline, but more templates will be coming. So have a look at this, and then have a look at the Zap templates, and reach out to us if you have further questions about the Zapier, or you can even, well, I'm going to make a promise I might regret, but send us some questions about Zap templates you would like to see. So, and I'll try to make them if they are not, if they are within my ability. So you can ask all those questions from support@sharetribe.com. Thanks for your time and attendance, and maybe see you next time. Bye.